I've been out here working on the wiring and insulation all day. Aiden's been helping me a little bit. Thought I'd do a little update on how that's going. I'm about 80–90% done with insulation on what I call the garage. This is this main section in here. Kind of what I'm thinking about doing, it wasn't my original plan, but it's kind of, I think it's gonna make more sense, is what I call the shop area over here, doing it last. Like basically get the inside of the garage completely done, painted, ceilings, wiring, everything done, lights hanging, and then focus on that area. Kind of use it as a storage area because stuff just gets in the way constantly. I've got junk piled up there. I can kind of shove stuff in there out of the way. Then when this is done, move everything back into the garage area and then just do it separately. It really doesn't add much efficiency trying to do it all at the same time anyway. For one thing, I'll probably have to take, there's tracks down on that garage door, and then the garage door won't be operable. So it's gonna be kind of nice to just take those down, get the whole inside done, and then be done with it. Yeah, because those will hit the scaffolding and just in the way for the ceiling and all that. So anyway, that's why this area really hasn't been touched yet. And this area, again, is 80–90%. I mean, yeah, at least probably 90% done with insulation. Some of these spots, like right here, you know, the studs are on 16-inch centers. That's like a 10-inch space right there. And if I put insulation in there right now, it may not stay very well, especially if you get some wind blowing through here or something. So I'm planning on just splitting a piece of insulation, putting it up in there right before I put the plywood on. That way, it'll probably be stapled on half of it. That's why there's some spots missing like that. We'll talk about the wiring here in a second, but leaving this open for now until we got all the wiring done. I've got one panel, or whatever you want to call it, right here. Haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to mount that yet. That's a 6.3 or 6 gauge wire for the hot water tank that's eventually going to be right there. And I haven't figured out how I'm going to come through the wall with it as far as a outlet box or whatever. So that's why that piece isn't insulated. It's really windy outside. I don't know if you can hear it on the camera or not, but this here is basically done. I could insulate it. It's kind of in the same boat where it's going to be kind of scrunched up. I'll probably end up splitting a piece. Let's see. Same thing with some of these little small areas. I'll probably just stuff some insulation back in there right before I put the plywood up. Most of that's done. This side's pretty well 100% done. But you know, I've never put any insulation in anything before, so I'm kind of learning as I go the best method. And it really hasn't been too bad. I've told a few people that, you know, building a, whatever you want to call this, stick built, foundation, garage, whatever, compared to a pole building, it's way more costly up front. The foundation's a huge headache and all of the challenges with it and all that. But there is some advantages to it when you get done, which is what I call, you know, being just on 16-inch centers. It makes everything so much easier to put walls up, insulation. You know, a lot of times the pole buildings you're dealing with foam boards, which you gotta sit there and custom cut those out. This stuff just goes up real easy. I mean, I use this, where's it at? Electric knife over here, like a carving knife for food, but it just slices right through that, just so easy. And so it makes it easy to cut around boxes and trim off the bottom and cut them, split them, whatever. Like right here, I've got a, I think it was like 20-inch spacing. See, we had this support for the I-beam. See it up there? And it just made the spacing weird here. So wasn't able to put a regular bat in. Had to make them 20 inches long and just kind of rough them in. So it looks a little rough, but it'll get the job done. But anyway, there's just so much custom cutting with it. It just goes so easy with that electric knife. Again, putting the walls on, whether you use drywall or plywood, so much easier with 16-inch centers versus other things. Like maybe pole building would be on 8-foot centers. Then you're trying to, if you want to put walls in like that, you either got to put 16-inch centers everywhere in between and try to mount all that, which is not the end of the world. And I'm not saying that it's not better in the long run, because again, you get avoided all of the foundation work and everything. But my point is, I guess there is some advantages if you go this route with foundation type building. You know, in my case, I didn't have any choice. I've talked about this before, where I was on a hill. It's really not possible to do a pole building in that situation. Plus, I wanted siding to match the house and different things like that. I didn't have much choice, but if I did, it's something to think about. It just makes the interior so much easier being on 16-inch centers, from what I've found. And I've talked to a few people that's doing the same sort of thing. Guy at work, he's trying to finish out his garage. I think it's a 30 or maybe 28 by 50 or something like that. that he's in the exact same boat. He's trying to figure out how he's going to insulate it and walls and all that, exactly what I've just been talking about. So anyway, I thought it went pretty smooth so far. It's pretty much me I usually get an assistant, whether it's Aiden or Red out here to help me cut them and then hand them up to me. You know, all this is got to be done on scaffolding to get to the top, and I sit there and just hang them with a couple. I got a staple gun, just a hand one, just hang them there. Then I come back around with that pneumatic staple gun, work them from the top, then make another row past the bottom. Then I sit on that stool and go around the bottom and custom fit it in behind the wiring. Because, you know, some people just smash that in there. You're really supposed to rip, like kind of split the insulation and stuff, some of it back behind it, some in the front. Because if you smash it, it reduces the insulation value because you don't have the air pockets anymore. It's just smashed glass basically. So, and it's not too hard. You just kind of rip it, split it behind there, trim it off the bottom to get it exactly right. Again, work around these receptacle boxes. But I mean, that's just kind of a one-person job. Again, I just kind of have an assistant help me get it up there. But anyway, enough about insulation. Let's talk a little bit about wiring too. I've got this whole area pretty much done in terms of roughed in. You know, all the receptacles are in. The light switches are in. Of course, anything in the ceiling is not done yet because there's nothing to mount it to. They're just, wires are just hanging there ready to go. Like for instance, right here, there'll be a outlet box or receptacle right there in the ceiling. Those two will connect. That comes down to here. That feeds over to that way. So none of that's really connected yet until I get the ceiling done. But you know, it takes some time to plan out exactly how all the different circuits are going to work. You don't want to get too many receptacles on one, but you don't want to get too little, and you're just running all kinds of breakers and circuits to two receptacles somewhere. You know, it just doesn't make any sense. So I try to think it through and make it logical how to do all that. Plus, I've got outlets on the outside of the building that you got to figure out how they're going to get connected. You know, one thing I spent some thought and time on was how I want these the lights to work in terms of the switches. So I ended up going all out, I guess you could say. There's a couple different ways I could have done it, but you know, I'm going to have 3 banks of lights. The front bank here, the back section, and in the shop area. And you know what I could have done was just put 2 switches here for the front and the back, and then when I got over to the shop, have 1 switch over there to kick the shop lights on. Well, I don't know. I've just kind of got thinking, it may be really convenient over 30, 50 years, however long I live here, to be able to control everything from both places. So, you get back over here, you're walking out at the end of the day, leave, oh shoot, I forgot the lights are on in the shop. Well, basically I wanted to have 3-way switches that everything can be controlled from here and from over there. So you're back there working, you know you're gonna be back there for a while, you wanna kill all these lights, you can just switch them off right there. So again, there's gonna be 3 switches here, 3 on that corner, right as you come around the corner on the left there. So you just walk in, flip them on or flip them off with your hand there. And which that meant I needed to run what they call 14 3-wire, 14 gauge, 3 different wires plus a ground. So I got that white wire to do all that. So I ran that way, and then you got 3 different banks to feed power wise. So there's 3 different circuits coming into this. So basically 3 coming in, 3 going out, 3 switches here. Then there's gonna be 2 switches here, 1 for each of the outside lights in the front. I got 2 outside lights in the shop area. They'll have 2 switches for that. Plus I'm gonna have a switch that powers the overhead light above the workbench for extra light above it. So anyway, I had to think through that, had to get wire and measure and all that, try to, you know, they sell it by the foot, so you gotta try to get it fairly accurate. But got that done. And then the welder outlets are, you know, a major consideration here because, you know, you gotta think about where you're gonna want them at. You also don't run too many or put them in the wrong place because this wire is pretty expensive. You know, this is 6'3", again, 6 gauge, 3 wires in it plus a ground. And it's right now, the cheapest I could find was $4 a foot. So, you know, if you don't want to run too much extra or you can take it any further than you need to, it's not like the yellow wire, and this is 12-2. I've got so much of it, it's fairly cheap. You know, you definitely run a little extra here and there and just don't worry about it too much. But something like that, you really try to cut it fairly close. But anyway, what I'm gonna have is an outlet right here for the welder. So that'll be able to reach anywhere in the shop area, this area pretty easily, which is mostly where welding would be going on. And even towards the garage door, this is 28 feet. So, you know, if I end up having a 20-foot extension cord on the welder plus the lead on it, you know, I could easily reach anything from there. And then I'm gonna have a second welder outlet right underneath the breaker box. So nice and short, couple foot piece right here. And that way give me, another option if I'm over here working on something, plug in right there. So 2 welder outlets. And then I needed to figure out my air compressor. I really haven't chosen one yet. Trying to decide on that a little bit. And I don't have to, at this point, I don't have to decide anything until I get one, which would be a couple months at least. But probably gonna end up with like a 5 horsepower. I don't know. I may go bigger. A couple different things to think about there. But ended up, I could have got away with 10 gauge wire, but I ended up splurging a little bit and getting 8 gauge. It's 8.2 with a ground. So it goes up and over. And in this case, it's pretty much the furthest length it could possibly be because I'm wanting to put it in that back left corner right there. So it's going to go overhead and drop down into there and come out and feed the air compressor. And then, well, I mentioned the hot water tank 6.3 gauge over to there. And then we also kind of plan to put a hot tub in somewhere around the garage at some point in time. Who knows how long, maybe never, maybe next year. But there's about 3 different locations we might end up putting it. One is over here by the deck. One is in this corner on the outside, of course, and the one possibly on the back side here. And really couldn't decide at this point where we wanted it. And but I did want to go ahead and get wire because it's so much easier to run that wire now than later. So since we couldn't decide exactly, what I did for now is I ran a 6.3 up, over, and just left it right there. So once we figure out where that's going, I'll have to crawl back in the attic and put a little junction box right there, tie into it, and then pull the wire whichever direction, and then drill a hole in the ceiling, drop it down through some conduit, run it out the side. I mean, it'll still be a little bit of a job, but that'll eliminate half the battle of just having the wire there ready to roll, already wired into the breaker box and everything. So trying to think through some of that stuff. And again, you don't just want to buy way too much wire. I mean, I could have wadded up a 100-foot roll in there. That way it get me where I want to go, right? But, or not even 100 foot, 50 foot. But even that's an extra, what, $200 just to roll up a piece of wire in there. So I figured that's my best bet. Either way, I'm gonna have to buy wire. Might as well buy it later and tie it in exactly how much I need. So anyway, that's kind of a long story short on the wiring. Again, there's all kinds of receptacles everywhere. I'm not gonna go through all that. But at this point, everything's pulled over here, even the shop wire. So like right now, it's just hanging at that corner. I pulled out plenty down here, hanging it over here. And once I get ready to work in here, I will finish, drilling holes, pulling wire where it needs to go, put receptacle boxes in. But I wanted to kind of get everything over here because as soon as I get the walls up, I will be ready to put the ceiling up. And at that point, it's gonna be a lot harder to pull the wire. So I wanna go ahead and get everything pulled. So what's hanging here, I'm pretty sure is everything that's gonna need wired in. And one day here soon, my dad's gonna come over and help me run all this into the breaker box, tie it in with everything, dress this up all nice and neat. But for now, I just got it hanging there. And then once that's done, I will put the insulation in and all that, finish that side out. So lastly, I think I may update on the wall situation, which is my next mission. You can see I got a stack of plywood right here. Been thinking a lot about that for months. I don't even know, a year maybe. For a long time, I was heading down the path of just using drywall. And I got thinking more about it. For one, as I learned more about the mudding operation, the finish work on it, I realized it's quite the endeavor, especially for this much wall, how high it is. And I felt like it was gonna take a lot of time and effort to make a heck of a mess and may not ever look right. I got a quote for somebody to come and do it for me. I think he was $1,800 to mud it, $1,700 to hang the drywall, plus materials. And then of course I'd paint it. So I was looking at $3,500 for the labor if I paid somebody, plus maybe around $1,000 in drywall, which I could have went that route. There's no perfect way to do it from what I found. It's just there's advantages and disadvantages with all wall types that you look at, and you just got to decide what's the best, what you feel most comfortable with, I guess. And where I basically ended up is plywood. So I also looked at OSB, thought some about it. It has its advantages. It's cheaper. But it's harder to paint because you got to use a certain type of primer. The humidity's got to be right. It can swell over time. It kind of flakes off paint over time, I've seen. But again, it's cheaper than plywood. Plywood, about double the price, but you don't have to worry about the primer paint. It paints real easy. You don't have to worry about swelling and all that. But one reason I'm going with plywood over drywall is just the durability factor. I got thinking more about being out here and working a little bit and bumping it with stuff, and just, I feel like over time I might tear that drywall up. Maybe not a lot, but here and there you might bust a hole in it as you're working on something. Jack handle hits it, or just whatever. And at first it's going to look really nice, I would think, nicer than plywood's going to look. But over time it would look, it could get looking worse. And I think too, this is just my theory, once I get done with the place and get it filled up, I don't think it's going to matter that much. I think at first you get done, you're going to say, plywood looks okay, but drywall will look better, which is probably right. But again, once it gets a little dirty, gets stuff hanging off the walls, vehicles in here, I don't think I'm going to care that much. 5 years from now, I'm probably not going to care. And this is just going to be so much easier. All I got to do is cut it, hang it, paint it. That's it. And another thing too is it's easier to take off if you ever wanted to redo something, or run some new wire or whatever. It's more serviceable than plywood or drywall is. And two, you can hang stuff wherever you want, which I know a lot of people talk about that. And I've always thought, well, what's the big deal about finding a stud? Just get the stud finder out. So I don't put a lot of weight on that, but it is an advantage. You can just hang stuff wherever. It's pretty strong. This is, I went with 1/2 inch. They make 3/8. I looked into it a little bit. It really wasn't any cheaper. This is a little bit heavier. So it would have been maybe a little lighter to work with, but different grades to it, and it's just how much you want to spend. I think to go one grade up in terms of the imperfections in it, it was double the price. So I think I'm going to have maybe $1,500 or so, maybe a little more, just for the walls and plywood. So figure another $1,500 to have less knots in it. Sorry, I hit the wrong button there. The problem with that is that the knots is you're going to see them a little bit, but this might not be the bad side or the good side. One side's better than the other, and I got to check. And then some of them, if they're so bad, I might just take them back and get better ones. Just kind of get a stack of them, work at it for a while. If some of them are real bad, just set those off to the side, return them, go get some more, that sort of thing. I think I'm going to need about 60 sheets roughly. That's 30 right there. But just picked up 30 to get me started and see how things go. One thing with it is I'm going to have to, what am I trying to say? It's not tall enough. So it's like 10.5 feet from the ceiling to the block. And these are 8 foot. So I'm going to end up having about 2.5 feet of a second strip around the top, which is going to be a little bit of a pain, but not too big a deal. That top piece should go in pretty easy. The bottom piece is where all the work's going to be at with trying to fit around. Like I'm going to have to measure and then hope I get that hole right I cut out ahead of time, flop it up there, hope everything lines up good, with only a plus or minus a 1/4 inch to spare or so around those receptacle boxes or whatever I'm working around. And so anyway, the top piece should go easy. You just cut out 2.5 foot piece, set it up there and screw it in. I plan on using screws on it, not nails. Make things easier to take apart one day if I wanted to. But anyway, I looked at metal, wasn't a huge fan of that. A lot of little things with metal, like, how do you fit around stuff? What happens if you get to a receptacle? And where's it hit at? Is it hit on a flat spot? Does it hit on whatever that's called, corrugated or whatever? Is it hit that? Same thing when you meet up with stuff like that I-beam or the ceiling or this corner. Where's all going to be? In terms of, it's not really a flat surface. Two is really expensive. I think I was looking at closer to $5,000 in materials for metal walls, which I would splurge for something like that if I really wanted it. But on top of not really wanting metal, it didn't make sense to spend more on it, because you're basically getting materials to roof, and this is about 2,000 square feet of wall. So imagine if you're roofing a 2,000 square foot house, you're probably looking at close to $5,000 in materials these days plus labor. So that's about right. But I wasn't a big fan of the kind of the tin can fill inside. They say it echoes a lot more. Drywall or wood kind of dampens it a little bit. What else with it? Doesn't insulate as good. It's kind of, you think about it, the studs are not as insulated as like insulation. The R value is way less, so these are colder than the rest. Well, when it gets to here, you got something that, like metal, that just radiates like crazy. It's going to radiate that cold to the center. So it's almost like the insulation is doing nothing in the middle. More with wood, that cold area is going to stop pretty quick, because wood's a decent insulator, much better than metal. So they say it's harder to heat a metal building or metal interior like that. it's just hard to work with, cut everything out, and I don't know. I just wasn't super excited about it. I mean, it has advantages too, like you don't have to paint it. You just put it up here and you're done. But paint's not too big a deal in my mind. So anyway, went through all that. What other options was there? Maybe that might have been about it. There's some other crazy stuff. People do pegboard everywhere. That's fairly expensive, and I don't like the looks of it too much. I mean, again, some of it's just personal preference, and this is kind of where I ended up. We'll see. Hopefully I don't hate it. I doubt I will. Maybe one day I wish I would have done drywall, but I kind of doubt it. I think just be happy to get it done, and when you get it up there and it's all painted, and I think it's gonna be fine. But I'll appreciate the durability aspect of it. I considered a fire rating too to the different materials. This isn't the best option with fire rating. You can get fire rated plywood, but it's like triple the price. So once again, you're like, do I spend an extra $3,000 and hope that it might save me one day from a fire getting worse? Well, the fire could not even matter. It hits the ceiling, which I'm definitely not using fire rated on, and it burns it anyway. I mean, it's just, you're kind of paying $3,000 as a gamble to hope that it might save you one day. And meanwhile, plywood already is actually more fire resistant than you think. I mean, you have to have a hot fire up against it for a little bit. It's not like a spark's going to set it off. So anyway, I didn't put too much weight on that, but drywall I think is a little bit more fire resistant, and of course metal is pretty good. You'd have to get it super hot, and maybe it starts burning the insulation behind it or something. But that's considerations too to think about. But anyway, we'll see where I end up with it. Over the next week or two, I'll start hanging this, and I'll get a better feel for how long that's going to take. I think it's kind of a one-man job. I can probably sit here and work onto a sawhorse, cut the hole out, flop it up there, and screw it in, and kind of just take my time. I don't know how long it's going to take. Sometimes I try to estimate. Once I do a wall or so, I can say, well, it took me 8 hours to do that wall, and it's pretty easy to say, okay, I've got about 3 more days in that task. But until I do a little bit, it's hard to say. And of course, I get a little quicker at most of these things as I go and learn and get a little process going. But it's definitely gonna be a job putting the walls up, and then the ceiling, which I'm not gonna get into that now, having 100% finalize what I'm doing there. But the ceiling will be another pretty good effort to get it up and then paint it and all that. But anyway, that's enough rambling. I thought I'd do an update on that, and maybe once I get the walls up, I'll do another update, or at least get partially done with them. I'll do another update on that.